Bosch University medical student. We hear from the final year medical student at Stellenbosch who recently completed her personal cycling championship that was aimed at assisting other students to pay off that debt. So that conversation coming up at 4:45. And then just after 5 o'clock, it is the interview and the conversation that we were supposed to have last week with the Solicitor General will have this week. So hopefully this time around we do get the Solicitor General. So those are all the stories that we have on the agenda this afternoon.
Beyond the Headline with Aldrin Sampear on SAFM. Weekdays 3 to 6 p.m.
Starting off with the announcement of the repo rate, the South African Reserve Bank remains unchanged at 8.25%. That is the repo rate. The Reserve Bank Governor Lisitsha Kganyago has just made that announcement. We speak to Klanti Bai next, who is a senior economist at PwC. Klanti, good afternoon. Thank you so much for making time for us. So headline inflation yesterday coming in 0.3% higher than what the Reserve Bank or the MPC had predicted, but yet we still get this announcement that the repo rate will remain unchanged. What do you make around this difficult balancing act that the MPC had to do?
Good afternoon, Aldrin. I think the important thing, and I think perhaps we have to try and explain, is that we use two measures for inflation or CPI. The first one is what is called headline inflation. That's the one that's usually announced. So the one we are talking about, just 5.8%. Then there's a second measure that is called core inflation, where we remove food prices and energy and petrol prices, because those two are rather quite volatile, and that volatility is what usually leads to a lot of the concerns that you see. Now, one of the things that emerges from these numbers, of course, is that what we've seen with the food prices in particular, which is the headline inflation, is that we saw the shocks in terms of the chicken prices that went up and eggs. And that's those eggs, of course, because of the shortage that we had, because of that shock, sickness in the birds. And then the second one has been potatoes, and that is poor production in potatoes. So that pushed up food prices. But that's a temporary thing that is seen, that over a period of time that should actually continue to come down. Then, of course, we've seen some, performance in terms of transport prices or fuel prices that are seen to be receding a little bit. So, but if we look at core inflation, so the stable measures, that's probably much better to look at, because that is about 4.5%, right at the midpoint. And that's something that's much more sustainable. So that it sounds that inflation, therefore, is starting to stabilize and is coming before. And then, of course, what is important is to look ahead. Remember, the Reserve Bank tends to look ahead. So when they were increasing interest rates, they were looking ahead at the factors that were, pressuring prices. And that's what they were acting on. Now that has come in, that is something that has been helpful. That will start to reduce, so that gives us some hope that the cycle has ended, and that perhaps we can now look towards lower repo rate.
But we don't know exactly when that will be happening, and also looking at the prediction that has been made by the MPC around when we expect headline inflation to stabilize. They still speak about the 5.8% in 2024.
Yes, 2024 is next year. Remember, one of the key things is that what we have now is tight monetary policy. So basically, it's above what you would call the neutral rate, as they like to call it. So actually, it doesn't have to be tight. So before it was accommodative. So there is space to actually untighten it, because now that inflation has receded, you no longer have to have tight conditions. So you are able to reduce it. So it doesn't have to be loose as it was, and likely not go back to those low levels that we came from, but there's still space. So if you are starting to sit below the 6%, you are able to actually say, look, if we look at it and it's actually it's within the target, and we think it's going to stay within the target for longer, then it does allow space, to loosen a little bit, so that actually you give to take off the pressure that has been that was introduced merely because inflation was high. So we have to actually take cognizance of the fact that where we are now is very tight, and you can actually loosen, and that could allow a little bit of breathing space, but without having low interest rates as we have. So there is definitely scope in the next year to see rate cuts, even though we must be clear that one is not likely to see what we saw when we were at historical lows.
I wonder then what the ripple effect will be around the logistic constraints that the Reserve Bank governor speaks about, also considering that he says that unfortunately with the logistical constraints that we currently have, it will lead to increase in cost of doing business and also the cost of living.
Certainly, I think that's a very, very big worry. And again, an area where we have to look whether actually we are dealing with a short-term problem or a long-term problem. And I think that's something that they're going to be looking at. Because remember, if you have logistics problems, which, for example, we can't get those goods into the country, but we are getting to a situation where, for example, in December, we know people spend a lot and there's going to be a lot of demand, but you can't meet that demand you can't because you don't have the supply because things are stuck on cranes and all sorts of things like that. Then, of course, that could really add a lot of pressure. I remember this is the same kind of pressure we saw with increased prices when we had, for example, problems, around Russia, where basically we could not transport goods or they were taking long, the Chinese problems and all sorts of things. So where we are, and then there was an outbreak in China that was quite elongated, and therefore we couldn't get stuff into South Africa, and that created increased prices because we had little shortages. So where this thing is going to give us shortages in goods, then that's going to give us inflationary pressures, and actually it might affect even that core inflation we were talking about. So it's a very, very important thing, and it's a big, big worry. But one hopes that actually, as they said, that's something that they can actually resolve in the coming months rather than longer than that, because of course then that closes any gap that we might be hoping for lower interest rates, because obviously there will be pressure on inflation.
Thank you so much for your time. Klantipa is a senior economist at PwC, and actually today the President as well as the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, were in the Richards Bay port today to go and oversee the crisis that the port is currently facing, and of course that 10-kilometer long stretch of queue with the trucks with the loads on cargo that needs to be delivered at that port as well. And as you heard, the impact that could have on core inflation. 0614-104-107. You can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear, and our studio line is 086-000-2032.
The only talk radio afternoon drive show that makes sense. Beyond the Headline with Aldrin Sampear, right here on SAFM.
So we speak to Pearl Makubani next. SABC News report on the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. So investigating officer in the murder case, Sergeant Batu Mukhola, has told the High Court in Pretoria that accused number 1, Muzisibia, refused to go to the hospital after alleging that he was assaulted. Mukhola has wrapped up her cross-examination in a trial within a trial to establish the admissibility of an alleged confession statement. Interestingly, though, today we also witnessed a heated courtroom exchange between Judge Mukhatleng as well as Advocate Zandile Mshololo. Take a listen to that, and then after that we speak to Pearl Makubani.
What's happening now?
My Lord, I thought the state is the one who is leading the witness.
Yeah.
My Lord, but the issue arose when Mr. Mnisi is the one who was when a
Mr.
cross-examination.
Mnisi will start his cross-examination from scratch. So too Mr. Ngomezu. Okay. Anybody else who
So we're going back to the examination in chief, my Lord.
Cross-examination.
If it's cross-examination, then it should be Advocate Mnisi.
Mr. Mshololo, you want to run this case? I can recuse myself. Okay. I have no problem in doing that. I told you I've made a decision. If you think that decision is wrong, take me on appeal. You got that right, or on review. Right, sir.
Okay, Pearl Makubani, SABC News reporter covering the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial, now joining us on the line. Pearl, what happened here?
Well, good afternoon, Aldrin, and the listeners. Initially, when the witness, Michael Dupree, who's an expert in the tracking data that was presented in court, before he took the stand, Zandile Mshololo wanted to sit down with him and the other defense lawyers, go through the evidence that he had before he presented it in court. However, Judge Mokgotleng felt that was not in line, said they do have access to the data and they should listen to his testimony before then. Then they can cross-examine any way they want, and which means even if they want to start from scratch, then so be it. She thought that was not in line because she felt that she wanted to listen to see what the evidence was, consult with the client before Dupree took the stand. However, Mokgotleng made a ruling, and Dupree got to go through the data which pertains to a vehicle that Mogane was driving on several occasions following Ntanzi's arrest.
Okay. Is there any indication at all from the defense that they want to take it on appeal, as the judge has said, or is the matter now done? That particular element.
Yes, they just settled on the ruling and just let Dupree proceed. He was led by the state, and one of the interjections was that because the state was done with the evidence to the chief, they were in the process of cross-examination. So that's what the objection came from. But however, State Prosecutor George Baloyi was literally just letting Dupree go through the data from various dates in June 2020 where the vehicle was traveling. What is different about Dupree's testimony versus Mogane's testimony is that he knows the areas really well, and he can say that this is a residential area, this is an industrial area, because when Mogane was questioned as to, yes, you were turning on this street, do you know what was happening there? Is it a shopping center? He was not clear on the specific areas. So Dupree is literally just giving light and exact locations and the name of the areas and what was happening in the shops and houses that were there, just giving more clarity to data that has already been, before the court.
Just a quick one also, again, the tension that sometimes emerges between especially the defense as well as the presiding officer. What sense are you getting from the defense around how the presiding officer here, Judge Mokgotleng, is actually presiding over the case?
And there have been a few whispers. Sometimes the defense feels that, they're being unfairly treated and the judge is taking the side of the state versus them. But Mokgotleng has been very clear that he's been hearing all these things and he knows the comments and he keeps going back to some law and things that he's supposed to do and how he's supposed to interject when things are moving slow, that this trial has taken a long time, and given the fact that it had to start from scratch, it's up to him to ensure that all these delays are not happening, and whatever objections are there should be relevant, but they should keep things moving. You can sense a lot of tension and irritation in the voices, and sometimes even facial remarks that are made, amongst themselves when somebody is saying something in there. However, they have to keep the decorum and respect each other regardless. So we are going to have these little altercations, but at the end of the day, the trial needs to proceed.
Yeah. And are we any close to a judgment on the trial within a trial?
Well, I know that this trial is supposed to take recess on the first week of December. I'm not quite sure yet if we're going to see finality of this trial within a trial or it's going to carry on throughout next year, the beginning of next year, given the fact that nobody could anticipate that it would take as long as it has taken thus far.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Aldrin.
If you're active on social media and love SAFM, we hope you'll take a moment to like or follow our SAFM page on Facebook and Twitter. These are the best places to find all the guest information, conversations, and stories you love from your favorite presenters, along with regular updates from SABC News. And don't forget, you can send your questions to feedback@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversation.
Black Friday is back at Dis-Chem. Now for 9 days, from Wednesday 22nd to Thursday 30th November. Make the most of big offers and huge savings. Get 2 Sanex 750ml shower gels for only 140 Rand. Save 69 Rand 90. And save a whopping 80 Rand per pack when you buy Huggies Gold Value Pack nappies. Now only 149 Rand 99, in-store only. Get down to Black Friday at Dis-Chem. Better health starts here.
This special acknowledgement goes to Hollywood Bets.
Your heartwarming support gave millions of South Africans a thrilling experience during the Rugby World Cup France 2023.
The vibration that moved the nation.
Salute Hollywood Bets.
Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng.
Life is full of challenges, and when they come your way, learn to whack your way through it.
Yeah.
My father and my mother were highly disciplined people. I remember him saying, I have decided to deny myself whatever others are enjoying, to accumulate enough money so that any of my children who wants to study would have the resources available to study so that they don't have to suffer the way I have had to suffer.
The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za.
SAFM, leading the conversation.
The South African Reserve Bank has upgraded the security features on the banknotes to combat counterfeiting. Use the look, feel and tilt method to authenticate your banknotes. Find the watermark of the big 5 animals in each denomination. Tilt to see the security thread change color and feel the raised print on Madiba's portrait. Visit www.resbank.co.za or download the South African Reserve Bank currency app. The South African Reserve Bank, connecting us.
#SAFMBTH
0614104107. You can drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear, and our studio line is 086-000-2032. We're in conversation next with Dr. Guy Lamb, who is a crime and policing specialist at the Department of Political Science at the Stellenbosch University. So the World Bank has released a report on the impact that crime has on the economy. The report unpacks the economic cost of crime using business and household surveys to quantify it. In the report, it outlined that crime costs up to 700 billion rand per year and endangers the nation's growth prospects. To unpack some of the key findings, we are now joined by Dr. Guy Lamb. Dr. Guy Lamb, good afternoon. Thank you so much for making time for us. A lot of the time when we speak about the economy and crime, we normally just focus solely on the crime of corruption, but there are other crimes that also happen that have an impact on the economy. Tell us more about what this report says.
Sure. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to your listeners. I think it's a very interesting report. It's talking about, close to 10% of GDP is lost based on the estimations due to crime. I think it's also important to note that it's quite a narrow definition of economic loss. I think if we took a more holistic picture of it, we kind of used an example of an iceberg, where what the report is referring to is the bit of the iceberg that's above the water, and then there's all these other dimensions to crime, and it's linked to the economy that's below the water, which is much bigger. But maybe just to unpack the report a bit in terms of what it says. So they've been interested around, what are the costs that South Africans incur as a result of crime. So they look at, for example, households and businesses, and they sort of focus on the victims of crime. So, households who have lost possessions, lost assets, businesses who've lost assets, possessions, or businesses who've had to pay extortion, for example, or struggle to do business because of infrastructure theft, such as, copper cable theft, kind of internet goes down, electricity is down, for example. They don't, for example, factor in load shedding because it's not really a crime dimension, but certainly crime as a result of load shedding due to, power being out also impacts on businesses and households too. Then they look at also the costs of, businesses and households investing in security. So, for example, putting up target hardening from, CCTV to burglar bars to better locks on your doors to hiring private security companies. They also incorporate that into their calculations, and they look at, opportunity costs, but in a very narrow way. So they look at, for example, higher transport costs because of security costs need to be taken into account, such as, traveling on a bus or a train, loss of tourist revenue because, tourists are potentially dissuaded from coming to South Africa because of the high crime rate. And then they do take into account the amount of money that the state spends on security, namely the police, for example. And the police are one of the largest state institutions we have. And, increasingly we are investing more and more in the police because of the high crime rate. So that's what the report is talking about and kind of making these arguments around. There are losses to the economy because we lose so much to crime and have to spend so much on trying to protect ourselves.
Does the report look into the link between poverty, unemployment, and crime?
I mean, it kind of discusses it in quite general ways. And of course, this is a policy report, so it can't go into massive amounts of detail around this. And one of the points that it does talk about is unemployment. So what we do know from the violent crime scholarly literature and research that's been done by academics and scholars like myself is the context of poverty and inequality don't necessarily cause the crime, but create a series of interconnected risk factors that result in it. It's particularly a problem for younger marginalized men who struggle to find jobs, who are constantly humiliated, who then are in a situation where they associate with other young men who are at risk of perpetrating crime and violence. And as a result of, certain circumstances, often circumstances in their past, such as being exposed to family trauma and violence, that they are predisposed to committing violence. So the report talks to the background factors, doesn't necessarily kind of explain and discuss how these things are connected and how we can kind of engage in kind of interruption. But I think the important point that it does make around youth unemployment, and this is an urgent thing that needs to be tackled, because we do know from other contexts like Brazil where there's been an investment within, at certain points in time, unemployed population focusing on younger men, and as a result, you did tend to see a reduction in violent crime. So it is raising important points around the issue.
Thank you so much for your time. That is Dr. Guy Lamb, who's a crime and policing specialist at the Department of Political Science at the Stellenbosch University. It is 4 o'clock. It's time for the news with Leanda Mahome. Good afternoon.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Good afternoon, Aldrin. In your top stories, the Reserve Bank keeps repo rate unchanged and South Africans can expect a dark festive season, no thanks to Eskom. This is SAFM News. A very good afternoon. The Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago has announced that interest rates will remain steady. The repo rate will remain at 8.25%, meaning that the prime lending rate will stay at 11.75%. The governor says South Africa's inflation rate remains sensitive to shocks like the oil price. Headline inflation for this year is expected to come in at 5.8%. Kganyago says the electricity supply issues and the functioning of ports are essential factors to the economy. He says medium-term expectations remain elevated.
The committee, however, would prefer to see the expectations anchored at the midpoint of the inflation targeting range. Against this backdrop, the MPC decided to keep the repurchase rate at the current level of 8.25% per year. The decision was unanimous.
Electricity Minister Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa says load shedding will continue throughout the festive season. Ramokgopa says this is due to difficulties in getting some of Eskom's aging coal-fired power stations to operate. Eskom is currently implementing Stage 4. Ramokgopa was speaking during an oversight visit at Medupi and Matimba power stations in Lephalale, Limpopo.
We are going to ramp up maintenance to go up to 7,000 megawatts, but we are retaining a lot of this. So we see a situation of a festive season of extremely low levels of load shedding, and we are going to have days where there is no load shedding at all. But I think what is important is for us to prepare for a situation where the demand intensifies, and that's why we are working very hard. As we restore and retain these units, they remain on load, they become relatively more reliable. We're working on new generation capacity.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has been conducting an inspection visit at the Transnet port terminal of Richards Bay in the KZN North Coast. The visit comes after Transnet's decision to suspend the receiving of goods via road transport into its Richards Bay mineral port terminal. Transnet said this decision was taken in effort to minimize the congestion of trucks in the city. The municipality says the congestion has reached an uncontrollable levels and that the safety of road users within the city as well as surroundings has been at risk for months. Last week, the city of Umhlatuze says it intends taking legal action against the government and Transnet because of the impact of the congestion of trucks. Ramaphosa has been welcomed by the KZN Premier Nomusa Dube-Ncube and the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan. SATAU and PRASA have finally reached an agreement in the 2023-24 wage talks. Amanda Chemese from SATAU says PRASA is giving workers a 5% salary increment with no retrenchment during this period. However, demands for an increase in benefits such as medical aid, housing allowance were not met by the employer. The union's board members and PRASA's group CEO, Hisham Emran, will meet again next week to finalize any outstanding matters. Chemese explains.
We had a meeting with the Group CEO of PRASA and there was consensus. The management and the Group CEO finally met our demands after we had deadlocked 3 weeks ago. That includes 5% salary increment that must be implemented from the 1st of December 2023. There will be no retrenchments during this period of agreement. The management has also agreed to back pay the workers.
And finally, more than 50 people have died in Ethiopia's northern Tigray and Amhara regions due to drought-induced hunger. According to Tigray's Disaster Risk Management Office, 46 displaced people died after having already left their homes because of drought. In neighboring Amhara, at least 6 people and 4,000 head of cattle have died because of food shortages caused by the drought. For more than 5 months now, the US and the UN had suspended food aid to Ethiopia following allegations of massive theft. While parts of northern Ethiopia are facing severe drought, the country's southern and eastern regions are expected to be hit by unusually heavy rains. Recapping your top story, Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago has announced that interest rates will remain steady. The repo rate will remain at 8.25%, meaning that the prime lending rate will stay at 11.75%. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 4:30.
In your sports this hour, Akbay urges Swallows boss to be patient with Gompela's philosophy. Everton fans plan to protest against unjust points deduction this weekend, and Pharrell looks ahead to European Champions Cup campaign. More details at 4:30.
The only talk radio afternoon drive show that makes sense. Beyond the headline with Aldrin Sampear, right here on SAFM. Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.7 FM in Cape Town. This is Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
We are saying to JP Smith, you are not the law. You are simply an MMC. And if everybody in the Western Cape is afraid of you, we're not afraid of him. He's not a goddess of South Africa. He's not God. Everybody in the Western Cape, in the DA and so on, when he speaks, it's like it's God or Gabriel speaking. He's not Gabriel.
Gabriel, you've gone too far. Gabriel, you've gone too far, and you should hang your head in shame. For these wounds I cannot stay. You've gone too far. You broke my heart. You've gone too far.
This is Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline. This is Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
It is now 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. Coming up on the show in this hour, we'll play the interview that I had with Dr. Tribute Mboweni, who's an anthropologist. And this is on the research that she's done on the Mapungubwe National Park. And by the way, can I just once again say thank you to Dr. Stole. And one of the reasons that I really love what I do here on radio is the ability to share knowledge, to share experiences, and also to share our networks. Because when we were in Mapungubwe and we were speaking about the significance of the National Heritage Site and also UNESCO International Heritage Site, by the way, as well. We got a text message from Dr. Sipho Stole, who told us about the work that Dr. Tribute Mboweni has done and the research that she's done on Mapungubwe. And we then reached out to Dr. Mboweni, who was more than willing to come on the show and speak to us about the work that she's done and what has inspired her to do this particular work and the research that she's done on Mapungubwe. So once again, really appreciate it. Really appreciate that we have this resource reciprocal relationship with our listeners as well, who are able to inform and also influence the content that we are able to provide for a broader audience as well. So we'll be playing that interview that we had with Dr. Tribute Mboweni in the next short while. And then at 4:45, we'll play this time around, this is going to be a live interview actually. We'll be speaking to Sarah Kemp, who is a Stellenbosch University medical student. Always feels like when it comes to Sarah or Sarah, you need to find out from the person, is it Sarah or is it Sarah? I assume in this particular case it is Sarah. So we'll be speaking to Sarah Kemp, who is a final year medical student at the University of Stellenbosch, who has just completed a personal cycling championship that was aimed at assisting other students to pay off their debt. And that initiative was inspired by advocate and Professor Thuli Madonsela's efforts to assist students with their university debt. So we'll be speaking to Sarah, who will be joining us at 4:45. So that's what we have on the agenda in this hour. And then just another reminder that at 5 o'clock for the interview, we will be in conversation with the Solicitor General, Fetizani Pandelani, as we look at the state of the Office of the State Attorney. If you remember, we were supposed to have this conversation last week, but unfortunately, the Solicitor General was still locked in a cabinet meeting. So we're having the conversation this afternoon, just after 5 o'clock. 0614-104-107. You can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear, and our studio line is 086 000 2032.
SAFM supports a litter-free South Africa. Play your part in keeping our surroundings and environment clean. SAFM, leading the conversation.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
10 past 4.
10 past 4. Bob!
This is Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
Aldrin Timbala Kulabatuti, afternoon. Aldrin, I was listening to your show and I heard, I think it was Money Market, that Telkom has made a lot of profit. I was not surprised. The way Telkom is coming as Nakona Aldrin, they have to make that profit. And if you try to call them, you can feel that those guys who answer the phone, they trained to lie to you. Telkom can upgrade your contract without your consent. Telkom can increase the money that you pay monthly before the contract ends. There is a lot of things that Telkom is doing to exploit people. Thank you, Aldrin. It's Mgoni in Tepin.
Hi, Aldrin. I heard that they fined the Standard Bank 42 million rand. So I'm just asking myself, that 42 million rand, it was compared to what? If it's against the damage that they've done, then that means it's nothing. Because of Standard Bank and other banks, they contributed to the position where South Africa is now, whereby there is a high unemployment, high inflation. But you just find them 42 million. 42 million is next. Even if they say the law of the country says they must be fined 10% of the profit, but the damage that is caused, it's more than that. That's Jacob in Mukopan.
Yeah, because it's also about the ripple effect, right? And by the way, it is Standard Chartered Bank that has been fined that money. And we just listening back to the press briefing from the Reserve Bank Governor, Lisicha Kganyago, on the announcement that was made a bit earlier on, but also how he responds specifically to the question in relation to to the manipulation of the rand, and then we'll play that clip and hear what your response is. Hopefully we'll be able to get some analysis as well around what the Reserve Bank Governor had to say about that.
Aldrin, hope right and go to Sfesolo, the tracker. Aldrin, hey, these guys, they are playing cheap politics here. They're making us mambaras. These Tulas here, the labor minister, Now he wanna terminate the contracts, the tender contracts to this guy here. But now, why he don't just challenge him with this accusation that he made? Because he make an allegation about him bribery. Why you don't say I'm gonna clean my name? Then after that, terminate try to terminate the tender. So which one is which first, actually? Because I thought he should clean his name, and then after that, if he's found not guilty, then he can go on and say, I'm gonna terminate these people's contract.
Beyond the Headline with Aldrin Sampear on SAFM. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
It is 13 minutes before 4 o'clock. We're in conversation next with Lieutenant General Godfrey Libia, who is the National Head of the Directorate of Priority Crimes Investigations, better known as the Hawks. So earlier on today, the Hawks briefed the nation on the milestones achieved in the second quarter of the 2023-2024 financial year. In this quarter, 801 arrests have been made and 244 of those accused have been convicted, as well as sentenced for national priority offences. National priority offences that have led to the bulk of these arrests include fraud, cash in transit, robberies, narcotics, precious metals, as well as diamond theft, as well as corruption. The Hawks have seized various exhibits to the value of 92 million rand. To unpack these cases further, we are joined now by Lieutenant General Godfrey Libia. Lieutenant General, good afternoon, and thank you so much for making time for us.
Good afternoon to you and your listeners.
In terms of the cases that the Hawks have been dealing with in that second quarter, what would you say are some of the trends that you are picking up that are different to perhaps what we've seen maybe a year or two ago?
I think what we can say we are seeing some new trends is the involvement of foreign nationals who are appearing in various types of national priority offenses. What we didn't have in the past is crimes like targeting the fuel, the pipelines that convey fuel from the KwaZulu-Natal to Gauteng, as an example, as well as the kidnappings and demand for ransom. So those were not the types of crimes that we were seeing in the past. Now we are beginning to see that they exist. So those are the new trends that I can say we are observing them. Otherwise, the rest of the offenses, they have been there. We have been dealing with them.
Yeah, and when we speak about the fuel that is being stolen from these pipelines, I remember that Transnet has mentioned this as an issue before. Do we know what the modus operandi though of these, because essentially it is organized crime, of these criminals are?
Yes, we do know. Obviously, we wouldn't like to be teaching those who do not know. But these individuals knows where the pipes are, and you will find that we are dealing with the trucks that we have to be seizing, the equipment that they utilize to target those areas where they know that they can be able to harvest fuel. And thereafter they will be disposing those because, as you will know, that some people would like to appreciate that type of commodity that you can easily dispose of it.
Yeah.
So we know the modus operandi that they use.
Yeah. Could there be any link though between the increase theft of that fuel and also the cost of fuel, and therefore a market has been made available where this fuel that has been that is being supplied unlawfully would be made available to a market at a much cheaper price? And are some of the consumers actually companies and not necessarily individuals?
I will not be in a position to say that bigger companies will be the recipient of this fuel. But obviously, as you know, in the black market, people will still want to receive that type of cargo and dispose of it. I do not believe that bigger companies whose books are properly checked will be the recipient of this, because you really need to be accounting the amount of liters that you are receiving and those that you are selling. I think it's the low scale areas where they will be prepared to receive the cargo.
And then on the issue that you raised about the foreign nationals, also seeing that an Indian national was arrested for 330 million rand illicit tobacco that was found in the Eastern Cape. Please tell us more about that case.
With regard to that particular case, the Indian national was arrested for 330 million rands worth of illicit tobacco. What have happened is that on the 29th of June in 2022, our investigation team of the Hawks applied for a search warrant in order to search the business of Abdul Samad Ahmed Costa, who have got a storage in East London. So upon searching, we found illicit tobacco of various brands. And when you check the value of all these brands, that is what came to 30,492,936 rands. So those were seized for the purpose of further investigation. By the 11th of September of this year, verification process was finalized, which revealed that the tobacco that was seized from Qatar storage was actually illicit. That is when he was arrested. So the collaboration of the various law enforcement agencies, including the serious commercial crime of the EPCI, the National Prosecuting Authority as well as SARS ensured that Qatar is secured before the East London District Court. And that is where he was released on 100,000 rands bail. And his case will be coming tomorrow, the 24th of November. Those who would like to see him can attend that court. And here we will be providing the defense with copies of the docket to prepare themselves for the court date. So that is the nature of the crime that we are talking about.
Okay, and just a final one on Para. I noted that you said that there are two more suspects that are being sought, but have the Hawks been able to establish if there is any prima facie case, though, against the president as being alleged in that complaint that was lodged?
Yeah, from our side, we will not be determining the issue of there being a prima facie case or otherwise. That is the duty of the National Prosecuting Authority. Ours is to obtain all of the necessary evidence that is required. We are working closely with the National Prosecuting Authority in what we call prosecution-guided investigation. So what the prosecutors need, we get that and provide them. So they will be the one who determine as to whether there is a prima facie case or otherwise. And once they make a decision, we follow that decision and support them. So it is not in the jurisdiction of the police to decide as to whether here we have got a prima facie case or not.
Thank you so much for your time. Lieutenant General Godfrey Libia there, the national head of the Hawks.
This is Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
Well, earlier on, I was in conversation with the Dr. Tribute Mboweni, who is an anthropologist who has done some research looking at the Mapungubwe National Park. During the broadcast, when we were there earlier on this week, one of our listeners referred us to the South African studying towards a PhD on the contemporary human-place interactions in Mapungubwe in post-apartheid South Africa. In the study, she delves into the historical reflection starting from the time of the discovery of the site in 1932 onwards, and discovery being in inverted commas, and evaluates how Mapungubwe has multiple meanings for various social groups through ethnographic studies. To help us unpack a recently conferred thesis, we spoke to Dr. Mbowena, also asked about what inspired her to do this particular research.
That's a great question. I love talking about how I ended up doing this research in Mapungubwe. I grew up in Bushbuck Ridge in a place called Mkhuhlu, well, first Canningmore and then Mkhuhlu, and these are places that are not very far from the Kruger National Park. And I grew up in that area around, 94, 95, at the dawn of South Africa's democracy, really. And this was an interesting time because this was a time when, because democracy had just set in, a lot of organizations had to reform, right? And the South African National Parks was one of those organizations. And so what they did is they founded a section called the Social Ecology Unit, which dealt with needing to integrate, communities into the SANParks enterprise, because the history of conservation in South Africa is such that a lot of communities could not interact with these places, especially Black and, African and indigenous communities. And so they founded this unit, and they founded various programs within this unit. You had your Kids in Parks, you had your Imbewu youth programs, which I participated in. And that's where my interest in conservation really started. And I ended up then studying ecotourism instead of nature conservation because I couldn't get into nature conservation because of, space issues. And ecotourism, part of it, has nature conservation subjects. And then I did my work integrated learning in the Cape with Cape Nature. And ended up working as a field ranger in the Cape as well for just under 2 years. And in the time that I was working in the conservation space, there was sort of this, this people and nature, divide where people are seen as a foreign agent in these places, except when we come in, as tourists or when we come in as workers and laborers, right? And this kind of didn't sit comfortably with me. And I thought, in a country where historically people lived in these areas and people were forcefully removed from these areas, why is it that post-apartheid we are still seen as foreigners in these places? Because essentially, people were forcefully removed from these areas and then they were fenced off, and then we find ourselves valuing plants and animals over people. Right. And then for my master's, I did a study on the cultural connections between people and rivers, looking at the Vaal River in Barays. And then I decided that for my PhD, I wanted to take this work back to the national parks where this work had started for me. And this is how I ended up studying, this work. And then Mapungubwe, initially I wanted to do this work in the Kruger National Park because it would make sense. That's where I'm from. Until a friend of mine suggested that we go to Mapungubwe and I see what I think about it. And when I got to Mapungubwe, I was like, wow, I have to do my research here. And Mapungubwe is very interesting because it's not only a national park, but it is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site based on cultural values, right? Because of the history of it. And so I wanted to find out what it's like for a place that is a national park, but is also valued for its cultural values, how that works in post-apartheid South Africa. And it was explosive.
Explosive in which sense?
Mapungubwe has always been studied as this relic, right? With the archaeological work that's been done in Mapungubwe since the early 1930s. And so then comes the dawn of democracy, and then you have the post-apartheid South Africa, where all sorts of issues are now coming up in these areas. Because places, protected areas like Mapungubwe National Parks, essentially, have always been these ivory towers that are sort of protected from the practicalities, of like the everyday practicalities and the everyday social issues that are happening, in the country. But then comes democracy, and we are now having to deal with issues of land claims. We are having to deal with issues of people's belonging, people wanting to assert their belonging in places, including places that have been protected from these social issues. And so when I started doing my research, all those issues started coming up, the different kinds of belongings that people express in places and what that means, and, the different people who belong and those who are said to not belong as much. Issues of human-wildlife conflict, which have sort of kind of been avoided as well, for a while. But now we have to deal with it because there are people living in these areas. And issues of cultural heritage and the interpretation of cultural heritage in post-apartheid South Africa, because previously in colonial times, there was an emphasis on material objects. So the things that were found in Mapungubwe, those were the things that were mostly spoken about, but not so much, the people of Mapungubwe and the people who have interacted with this place and who continue to. But now in post-apartheid South Africa, you have to face those issues because people are coming through and saying, but we are descendants of this place, or we live in this place and we still interact with this place, and it is important for our voices to be heard.
Well, that is Dr. Tribute Mboweni, who's an anthropologist. We'll pick up that conversation that I had with her because I also asked her about the link that people have to land, because sometimes land is just seen as property, sometimes land is just seen as an asset, but there is a spiritual link to the land itself. So we'll pick up that conversation just after the market update that we will get from Makwe Masilela. It is 4:30, time for the news headlines.
Thank you, Aldrin. In your headlines, Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago has announced that interest rates will remain steady. The repo rate will remain at 8.25%, meaning that the prime lending rate will stay at 11.75%. Electricity Minister Dr. Kgosian Tshuramogopa has reiterated that Eskom will have a new CEO by the end of this year. The power utility has been without a CEO following the resignation of Andre de Ruyter in February. And the medical director of a hospital in northern Gaza has called for it to be evacuated because of a growing danger to patients as Israel continues to bombard the territory. Combat involving Israeli tanks and Hamas fighters has raged outside the hospital for several days. Details on these and other stories at 5 with Greg Rose for SAFM News. My name is Luyanda Maume and I'm out.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
And a traffic update with Rob Byrne.
A very good afternoon. A collision scene coming through Midrand on your way to Joburg. It's crashed just by the new road exit, and traffic is heavily backed all the way through towards around about just after Samrand. So Pretoria down to Joburg delays, and if you're on the way north, there's a bit of a queue heading to New Road due to onlookers. Also, a stationary truck on the M1 south of the William Mandela exit, heavy from Buccleuch down to Fourways, and a breakdown on the N3 going north near Marlborough Drive. So queues coming up passing Alex from the Edenvale side. Durban Spaghetti Junction really heavily back today, particularly the N2 north at this stage from Booth Road Bridge, moving up through Spaghetti Junction in towards the roadworks at the M13. And Cape Town, lots of load shedding today. Milnerton, Tableview, Montague Gardens across into Boertersuck, down through Century City and the Maitland area. So lots of chance for delays in those busy commuting areas. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Kapele.
And she smiles. What do you have for us this hour?
Well, a lot as per usual in the world of sports, and we start things off with football this hour, where Morocco Swallows goalkeeper Daniel Akpeyi has urged club chairman David Mokhashwa to embrace their newfound playing style under coach Steve Rompela, even in the teething phase. Now, the club boss has at least twice this season said that playing from the back philosophy was giving him anxiety, especially after the Dube Birds were punished for a costly error. But Akpeyi believes that this is the modern way of play.
If you look around the structures that every team play or most teams play in the world right now, which this whole idea came up from Pep Guardiola, I think it's basically we want to play from the back, and we work on it day after day, session after session to make sure that we perfect it. Well, it's expected that one of those hiccups is going to happen.
Well, Swallows host Kaizer Chiefs on Sunday in the DStv Premiership, and the Nigerian international sees no need to deviate from Khompela's instructions. Meanwhile, Everton fans are set to fly a protest banner over the Etihad Stadium ahead of Liverpool's clash with Manchester City on Saturday, and it comes after Everton was hit with a 10-point deduction for a breach of the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. In a statement, Everton supporters group confirmed a plan to stage a protest during Saturday's lunchtime kickoff at the Etihad, saying that they had a lot of requests asking for a plane to be flown over Goodison Park on Sunday with a message to the Premier League. In rugby, Owen Farrell says that he and his England teammates have found it hard to come to terms with going out of this year's Rugby World Cup at the semi-final stage, but hopes that a change of focus to club rugby will help put that disappointment behind them. The Saracens and England captain was speaking at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London at a promotional event to launch the 2023-24 European Rugby Championships Cup.
I'm not sure, to be honest. It's not been an easy one to process, but thankfully we've got some big games to get our teeth stuck into, and we're straight back into that. So settling in all right.
Well, Farrell says that he felt for England teammate Tom Curry, who looks set to miss the next Six Nations tournament because of injury, but is sure that the sail flanker will recover and come back even stronger.
It is. Tom's obviously had his first share of injuries recently, so it's tough. It's tough on him, but I know how hard-working he is. I know how passionate he is about what he does, and I know that he'll do everything he can to make sure he comes back and not just be as good a player as he was now. He'll be even better. So I've no doubt about that coming from him.
In tennis, Australia fought back to beat Czech Republic 2-1 and clinched their spot in the Davis Cup semi-finals. Thomas Machak beat Jordan Thompson 6-4 and 7-5 to give Czechs an early lead over last year's runners-up. However, the world number 12, Alex de Minaur, came from a set and breakdown to beat Jiri Lehecha 4-6, 7-6, 7-5 and send the tie to the deciding doubles. Australia will face Finland for a place in Sunday's final. Ending things off with boxing, Natasha Jonas won a world title in a second weight class this year, but she hopes to become a 3-division champion in 2024. Jonas has a high-profile IBF welterweight title bout with Michaela Mayer on the 20th of January, and afterwards she would welcome a showdown with the winner between Chantel Cameron and Katie Taylor. With that said, it's a wrap from my side for now. I'll have more in the next hour. For SAFM Sport, I'm Dumin Khabele.
#SAFMBTH. Gautrain is for the legends who make moves to save and pay from as little as 45 Rand from Pretoria to Midrand. It's for our clever who turn 5-liter bottles into workout dumbbells. And for the slim oaks who bring a home-cooked scuff team to work every day. So when it comes to travel, make moves that save and pay from as little as 45 Rand from Pretoria to Midrand Station. Gautrain, for people on the move.
Nothing beats the exhilarating atmosphere of Joburg's hottest horse race. This is the People's Race. It's not just sport, it's a lifestyle with a great sense of fashion and a jubilant scene to party and celebrate. Experience the Summer Cup on Saturday 25 November at 3:50 p.m. live on S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Kathy Motlatlana.
It's another cover-up for the president to not do anything about corruption.
All talk shop, but we never actually see anything actually ever being implemented.
We don't know who they're investigating. We don't know who they're prosecuting.
We don't know who's going to jail.
That council is useless. So you're asking him about the developments, what have they done? He is just beating about the bush.
That's just a sense, Prof. Kachalia, of what our listeners have to say about the conversation. Let me give you an opportunity to respond to some of those concerns.
We are not, as a council, able to address that trust deficit. But we're going to keep our attentions focused on the job at hand. I've indicated where I think their progress is being made and where progress isn't being made. I can't do more than that.
Professor Feroz Kachalia, the chairperson of the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council.
The Talking Point with Kathy Motlatlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
And it's time for a market update with Makwe Masilela, Chief Investment Officer at Makwe Fund Managers. Makwe, good afternoon. Welcome to the show. So let's look at Mr. Price and also Frontier Transport's interims.
Afternoon to you, Aldrin, and to the listeners. Starting with Frontier. Aldrin, these are the guys who own your Golden Arrows Bus services in Cape Town, and we know they also have some luxury and semi-luxury couches. And we've seen that since COVID-19 restrictions, the restrictions were entirely lifted on the 22nd of June 2022. We are almost back to normality with public transport back in use, even though not yet fully. But civil unrest, taxi riots, high fuel prices are putting a damper on their operations. But with Metro Rail still not yet knowing what they're doing, it's a positive for the company, and they've seen their revenue going up by 6.9% and profits as headline earnings per share up 64%, and the share price reacted positively up 3%. And with Mr. Price, we know that the environment continued to be challenging. The guys lost almost 60,000 of trading hours, equivalent of 190 million in revenue, and that's due to load shedding, and high food and public transport plus high interest rates are putting a strain on consumers. And because of elevated inventory levels, they had to implement higher markdowns to clear excess inventory, and cash sales are at 87.8% of the group retail sales, which is a good thing. And increasing risk to the business, and I think other businesses as well in South Africa, is the instability of port operations. But for now, Mr. Price has adequate stock levels for the upcoming festive season. Revenue up 26%, profits as headline earnings per share down 9.3%, just like their interim dividend. But the investors were not too worried as the share price is up a whopping 7%.
And tell us about local and international market developments.
The November stock rally is continuing, with falling treasury yields giving stocks a lift. Market participants look into Chinese policymakers for clues on possible support for the long-suffering property market. Trading worldwide is quiet due to the US and Japan Thanksgiving holiday, and Turkey raised their interest rates by 5% to 40%. As we are talking, the inflation is sitting at 61%, and back home here, as highly expected, our rates were left change at 8.25%, a 14-year high, but inflation risk remain elevated, so further decisions will continue to be data dependent, and rates are expected to stay high for longer. And the knee-jerk reaction was for the rand to keep their earlier gains. Those gains were achieved when we've seen that there was a thin trade because of the US market being closed, and also investors digesting what the recent economic data mean for the interest rate outlook. But now the rand has just gave up most of those gains, is trading flat, and preliminary PMI numbers from the Eurozone showed employment fell for the first time in nearly 3 years, and their business activity continued to decline, though at a slower rate. And oil prices are extending losses after that postponement of that OPEC Plus meeting that itself stoked expectations that the group might not deepen output cuts next year. Brent crude is down 1.5% at 80.30, and signs of resilience in the U.S. labor market stalled yellow metals rally, as a strong labor market could keep the Fed relatively hawkish in the near term, although traders were convinced that the central bank will not raise rates again. And we see gold is flat at 1,992, platinum is down 0.3% at 918, the DAX just like the CAC up 0.2%, FTSE is flat, but the JSE is up 0.8%, driven mainly by our industrials, which are are up 1.5%, financials up 1%, but our resources are down 0.2%, and the rand is now 18.85 to the US dollar, 23.59 to the pound, and 20.50 to the euro.
Thank you so much. That's Makwe Masilela, Chief Investment Officer at Makwe Fund Managers.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 106.1 FM in Bombela.
It's now 18 minutes before 5 o'clock. So as promised, let's pick up on that conversation that we started playing just before the news headlines with Dr. Tribute Mboweni, who's an anthropologist who's done some research on the Mapungubwe National Park. And of course, this is following the broadcast that we had in Mapungubwe earlier on this week. One of our listeners reached out to us and told us about the work that Dr. Tribute Mboweni has done. So in this part of the conversation, I asked about the question in relation to the link that people have to land and how sometimes some people only focus on land as an asset, only focus on land as a property, but there's also that spiritual link that we need to focus on, and we also need to zoom on, and why it is important to the individual.
Yeah, and and I guess the other thing about it, as I was saying to Dr. Ndlovu, when we had the conversation with him at Mapungubwe, is that while people only would look at land as land, the asset, however, though there is the spiritual attachment to land that many people who had lived on the land still have to that particular land, and considering, of course, the family trees and the history of what connects them to that particular land. And I looked at the abstract that you've written, and you speak about this idea and the concept of discovery, which itself, as you say, is an act of dispossession.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Speak to us about that.
I mean, when people talk about the discovery of Mapungubwe, I mean, when I write about it in my thesis, I write it in inverted commas, because how do you discover a place that's been there, that, you know, and when you get there, there are people there, you know, but this is a colonial way of looking at place where people come and they discover places and they erase whatever else is found in that place before and during, you know, the occupation. But yes, like you say, people have, you know, ongoing connections, spiritual connections with the place. And these are some of the things that I was looking to do. So I was talking to people and mapping these places and walking with them in places and learning about these spiritual attachments and the everyday embodied attachments that they have, and affective, you know, attachments that they have with the place, and mapping these places that are of value to them. And so in addition to just talking to people and listening to people's stories, I've also mapped out the places that they consider places of significance for you know, for all sorts of reasons, spiritual reasons, family ties, historical reasons.
Yeah. And in conclusion, looking at the question that you would have asked when you started your research, the answers that you came up with, but then also how then do we ensure that we have a different approach to national parks, the conservation of national parks, but also not forgetting the element that says that once upon a time there were actual human beings who were living on this particular place before it was quote unquote discovered, as you say.
Mm-hmm. I think the most important thing that we need to consider is the interconnectedness and the continuous, you know, ties that people have with places. And so we need to do away with this human nature dichotomy. You know, we need to view humans as part of nature as well. So we need to instead think of human and non-human nature, because we all are, you know, interconnectedness. So in, you know, a newer approach to conservation needs to consider, you know, all of those ties that people have with these places.
Dr. Mboweni, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And all the best.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Just a quick one. What are you doing now?
Okay, apologies for that. That's where the interview was supposed to end. That is our interview and conversation with Dr. Tribute Mboweni, who is an anthropologist looking into the work that she's done and the research that she's done on the Mapungubwe National Park. 0614 104 107, and you can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear.
Hi, Aldrin.
The issue of manipulation of the rand is not a new issue. It started many years ago with whistleblowing by Kevin Wakeford. The outcome of that commission was incomplete and abrupt. Perhaps you could ask the Fundis about that. Thanks.
Hi, Adrian. It's Delane Kumede here in Durban. I'd like to applaud the president. I understand the pressure that comes up with for ensuring that he visits the port of Transnet, the port in Richards Bay, rather. You see, it shows a sense of urgency, and also the minister that people have been saying that this minister is invincible, Pravin Gordhan. So let's wait and see what are the outcomes, what were the deliberations, because we understand that there are a lot of trucks that has been waiting there for the president to put up an emergency on that particular story. It's really a great news indeed. Let's just wait and see what will be the outcome and what were the deliberations.
Let's go to Mandla, who's joining us from Joburg. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Good. How's it, Mandla?
Good, my brother. I asked for an opportunity to address an issue that was televised on Reddy's show.
Reddy?
Davy's show, I think, on ETV a couple of days ago.
Okay.
Yes. There's a school that was closed by the Department of Education in Midrand. I think it was about 3 weeks ago. And the information that was put on the show was incorrect about how it got to be closed. The school was belonging to a company called Pemberry Lifestyle Group, which was a listed company on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, company which we came across personally as a chief investment officer of Veritas in 2020, when they were on the verge of getting liquidated by one of the creditors, a company called one of the top audit firms in the world, called led by a guy called Leonard Roberts, More Global. That's the name of the company, More Global with a double O. So the company was going into a liquidation. They came and said, we need funding. They were getting liquidated in the same week, and they had staff unpaid. We looked at their proposal, and we said, okay, let's help. First thing we did, we provided funding, about 2.7 million for salaries, and then we did the creditor to stop the liquidation and so forth. Fast forward, we signed a deal with them where they promised to give us a lien on all the assets of the company. We signed a deal of 25 million rand convertible loan with the company. After signing that loan, we released money to them.
Sorry, Mandla, who's we?
The company is called Verity Hest.
Okay.
It's a private equity firm that I founded.
All right.
Yes. So when I say we, I mean the company.
Okay.
So we released this money to this company. We've been funding it since 2020 until this year. In March 2023, actually it started in November. They said there's a creditor who wanted to attach one of the assets of the company. They needed to stop that. They needed money, 500,000. I gave them the money in November last year. They stopped the attachment. They came back again in January. They needed R1 million. Now I wanted more information. Why you keep coming wanting money to stop things like this? Then a deal was made that the board would step down. Came in, I became chairman on the 6th of March 2023. On the 6th of March, the company also, in that board meeting, Mr. Begi Sibia was one of the members of the board. You probably know him from BMFI, former president of BMFI.
Yeah.
And can't remember the other guy, the chairman guy.
Mandla, can we do this, please? And I beg for indulgence here. Because I'm not familiar with this particular story. I'm going to put you back to the producer, The team and I will do our own research around the story as well, and then if possible, can we then bring you on the show, and then we'll do it as a story instead of just listening to you as a caller. Are you okay with that? Okay, thank you so much. That is Mandla there from Johannesburg. Sorry, I'm not familiar with that particular story, but we'll do some research on that story and see when we can bring Mandla back. 0614-104-107, and you can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear. Our studio line is 086 000 2032.
You are listening to Aldrin Sampear on SAFM.
It is now 8 minutes before 5 o'clock rather. We're in conversation next with Sarah Kemp, a final year medical student at Stellenbosch University, who recently completed her personal cycling championship that was aimed at assisting other students to pay off the debt, inspired by Professor Thuli Madonsela's efforts to assist students with university debt. Sarah says that she managed to raise just over 32,000. She joins us now to tell us more about her cycling journey. Sarah, good afternoon, and thank you so much for making time for us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the show.
How did you come up with this initiative?
Well, I heard about Prof. Madonsela's initiative, the Pilgrimage of Hope, where she's going to walk 300 kilometers to raise funds for student debt. And I thought, somebody of her caliber is doing something for student debt, then me as a student, why aren't I doing something? And I looked around at a couple of ideas and then hit upon the cycling idea as something symbolic. Cycling from university back home to represent the journey that students go on after graduating when they are back in student debt.
And how long would that journey be from the university home?
So it was about 1,500 kilometers, and I cycled 1,200 kilometers of that.
Okay.
Over 10 days. So we got going at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and then cycled between 100, 150 kilometers in a day. To try and raise some funds and interest around the Action for Inclusion initiative, which is aimed at reducing historic student debt at Stellenbosch University.
Yeah. How do you do it? How do you manage to do that? About 100 Ks for about 10 days? Jeez.
Oh, I was pretty slow. I think the trick is that you must just keep going. Anybody can ride a bike. You just got to stick it out.
Was this the first time that you cycled for so long and over so many days?
Yes, it is.
It was.
I've done the Cape Town cycle tour before.
Yeah.
So sort of a one-day stint, but it was the first long cycling journey that I'd been on.
Yeah. And were you alone on this one?
No, I had another medical student, Bianca Tout, who was my backup driver. So I was on the bike, and then she was in the car, and it was definitely teamwork to get all the way back to KZN.
Sure. I can't imagine cycling for 100 kilometers. Not even once a month.
No, it was.
And you've done it for 10 days.
It was tough, but I think it was for good cause.
Certainly it was for a good cause. So then how do you go about, because sometimes you'd speak to somebody or hear about initiatives like these where somebody says that this is what I'm going to do to try and raise funds. In your particular case, you're going to be cycling to raise funds. How do you then raise the funds? We've dealt now with the cycling element, but how do the funds come in? Who then gets informed about what you're doing so that they can donate?
So I set up a platform on Give and Gain, where members of the public can make donations, and then all of that money goes directly to the Action for Inclusion Fund, and they allocate it to students who need the money.
Incredible.
So if you go onto the Give and Gain platform, you can find the page there.
Yeah. Is the page still up and running, or are you now done?
We're coming towards the end of the campaign, but I think people can still donate if they want to.
Yeah,
I think there have been a couple of donations coming in. So.
Yeah, because student debt is quite a big issue, and it continues to be a big issue. So even after you're done with the cycling, you still have that particular problem with students struggling to pay off their debt.
Yeah, and members of the public can definitely donate to Action for Inclusion directly. They're an NGO that operates throughout the year indefinitely.
Yeah.
So
anything else that you're planning, like cycling to the moon?
Oh no, I think a good rest. A good rest and graduating and then, starting work next year.
So once you start work next year, are you thinking about any other initiative to still have this campaign up and running, at least so that this remains high up in the minds of many people about the seriousness of a student debt?
No, and I'd definitely love to stay involved with the initiative, with Actions for Inclusion, but I haven't come up with another campaign for now.
Okay, maybe we should bake about 1,000 cakes or something like that. What else are you good at besides being a medical student and being a cyclist?
I don't know, procrastinating from my studying, I
guess. Sarah, thank you so much for making time for us, and well done on raising this money. So you're still at 32,000, right?
Yes, at 32,000.
At 32,000. Okay, then. Well done. Time. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Okay.
That is Sarah Kemp on the campaign to pay off the debt of many university students who struggle with university debt, and she was able to raise 32,000 rand by cycling from the university back home, and so 1,200 kilometers. Can you do it? Can you even walk for 5 kilometers? 0614-104-107. You can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear.
This is Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
Let's quickly go to Mulala, who's joining us from Mangaung. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Aldrin. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Aldrin, I'm not sure, but the issue of the manipulation of the rand goes as far back as the days of the presidency of Nelson Mandela, not 2013. If you remember, at some stage, the President Mandela was forced to do a battery of tests after rumors were circulated that he was dying. And because he was dying, the next president, Thabo Mbeki, who's hawkish, a communist, so many things were said about him which were negative. And as a result, the rent went down, if I remember well, at about...
So to explain what hawkish means, are you saying that people who favor higher interest rates?
No. He was a communist. He was going to destroy the country. Unlike Nelson Mandela, was a reconciler, and Mbeki was something else different.
Okay.
As a result, and they say he was dying. And the President Mandela at the time was forced to do a battery of tests to find the man was fit as a federal.
To do a what test?
They found that the test found that there was nothing wrong with President Mandela.
What test was he asked to do?
Medical test.
Oh, okay.
The rumors was said that he was dying. That was around 1995, 96, 97. During his presidency.
Mm. And this was public knowledge?
That's public knowledge.
Okay.
And I can tell you at the time the rand went down by 6% overnight after those rumors went out.
Mm.
So the manipulation of the rand is not something new. It has been done almost since we gained independence. Okay. Democracy. Yeah.
I do recall when I spoke to the Competition Commission's head of cartels, he said that even former President Thabo Mbeki had commissioned an investigation into what happened to the value of the rand. There were some issues, but I'll try to go back to that. But thank you so much, Mulala, there from Mangaung. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to look at that report that the Competition Commission had told me about. Unfortunately, we run out of time. We need to go to the news. It's 5 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you. In this news update, interest rates to remain unchanged and call for Gaza Hospital to be evacuated. Good day to you. The Reserve Bank Governor, Lesotho Kanyako, has announced that interest rates will remain steady. The repo rate will remain at 8.25%, meaning that the prime lending rate will stay at 11.75%. The governor says South Africa's inflation rate remains sensitive to shocks like the oil price. He also says the power supply issue and the functioning of ports are essential factors for the economy.
The committee, however, would prefer to see the expectations anchored at the midpoint of the inflation targeting range. Against this backdrop, the MPC decided to keep the repurchase rate at the current level of 8.25% per year. The decision was unanimous.
The Electricity Minister, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, has reiterated that Eskom will have a new CEO by the end of this year. Eskom has been without a CEO following the resignation of former head Andre Dureita in February. The minister says the Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan, has assured him that they're in an advanced stage of hiring a new CEO.
But the Minister of DP, who is a shareholder representative, is on record publicly to say that that appointment should be made before the end of the year. And of course, the chair of the board, newly appointed, has also indicated the board has complied with the requirements as per the memorandum of incorporation that given the minister 3 names. At the right time, the minister will bring those names to cabinet.
The City of Cape Town's urged residents to be vigilant of potential scammers pretending to be electricity officials. The city's Beverly van Renen says they've been made aware of incidents involving scammers in some areas. She says when the scammers enter the victims' homes, ostensibly to check their electricity meters, they instead steal personal items. Van Renen says city officials must always have a worker order number and a legitimate city-issued ID card. A police captain's been arrested at Kraaifontein in Cape Town on charges of extortion and intimidation. It's alleged that the officer received a substantial payment from the owner of a spaza shop in the area in exchange to operate his business without interference. Police spokesperson Malcolm Poiki.
Lodged a complaint at the Kraaifontein SAPS. We initiated a criminal investigation against the member. When the officer became aware of the case against him, he went back to and threatened the complainant to withdraw the criminal case against him. The matter was also reported to the local police in aggravation of the extortion case already under investigation.
The medical director of a hospital in northern Gaza has called for it to be evacuated because of a growing danger to patients as Israel continues to bombard the territory. Combat involving Israeli tanks and Hamas fighters has raged outside the hospital for several days. Dr. Marwan Sultan has asked the Gaza Health Ministry to immediately provide buses to evacuate the hospital's 200 patients.
I'm in the Indonesian hospital with another 10 medical professionals. We will not leave until the last patient gets out to the south. We have 200 wounded. The situation is very difficult. There is heavy firing targeting the hospital. They targeted water pipes. The injured are in pain. Their wounds are infected. Some of them are in a very bad state because we don't have any antibiotics. We give them only painkillers.
Top story, the Reserve Bank governors announced that interest rates will remain steady. That's SAFM News. I'm Greg Khos.
In your sports this hour, Van Wyk makes a return as Ellis names her 24-member Banyana squad to face Burkina Faso. Everton fans plan to protest against unjust points deduction this weekend, and Samuel's banned from cricket activities for 6 years. More details at 5:30.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Collision on the N1 South at Midrand, just by New Road. It's a heavy backlog back through Olifantsfontein. That's on your way to Joburg, plus some onlooking going on the northbound, causing delays up through towards the Olifantsfontein exit. Broken down truck on the N1 South at Winnie Mandela. That's heavy from Buccleuch. There's also a great big chunk of delays through northern suburbs due to load shedding between Sunninghill, Rivonia, and through the region towards the Fourways area as well. Also breakdown on the N3 South at Van Buren. So the usual backlogs coming from Limbro Park through Edenvale into Bedfordview. Very heavy around Durban this afternoon. There's new road closures in between Spaghetti Junction and Pavilion, so both ways is slow. The N2 dreadfully backed up northbound from the M7, heading up to the roadworks at the M13 bridge, and southbound's a bad backlog from Spaghetti Junction all the way down through towards the M7 Bluffex. I think there might be some traffic lights off of that junction. It's very heavy there. And Cape Town traffic this afternoon, some load shedding around Tableview and Milnerton, Montague Gardens and Boortessuck, so lots of delays there. And a crash scene on the Komiki Road at Masipumalala if you're heading in or out of Komiki. Factor in some queues, particularly on the outbound side towards Sun Valley. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Ford is turning 100, and there's never been a better time to buy a brand new Ford. We're giving away 100 vouchers worth an amazing 50,000 Rand each, and the sensational grand prize of us paying for one lucky winner's Ford. It's the celebration of the century. Visit a Ford dealer, buy a new Ford, and win. T&Cs apply.
Wow!
Finding out about my health has never been so easy. I just spoke to a nurse and I also got to ask a doctor a question, and I didn't even have to leave my home. Want to download your COVID-19 vaccine certificate? The National Health Hotline nurses and agents can help on 0800 029 999. And you can also ask a doctor a health question on the Kiredi WhatsApp line on 060 019 0000. That's Kiredi on 060 019 0000.
Second from the bottom, FC Köln confronts second from the top, Bayern München. The Billy Goats need a rapid plan to escape from the danger zone. Meanwhile, the Bavarians want to return to the summit. This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch the spectacular encounter between FC Köln and Bayern München this Friday, 24 November at 9:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Hashtag SAFMBTH.
It is 8 minutes after 5 o'clock. You're still listening to Beyond the Headline with me, Aldrin Sampear. Thank you so much for choosing us this afternoon. We're in conversation next with the Solicitor General, Fetizani Panderani, as we look at the state of the office of the State Attorney. Is it fit for purpose? We examine the scope and the complexity of the work in the State Attorney's office. Some of you may recall that earlier this year, post the release of the State Capture Report, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo expressed grave concern about the state's capacity to defend court applications that were aimed at reviewing the State Capture Report, as he was worried that the State Attorney is not sufficiently capacitated to defend the report. However, I must also state that it's not only him who's worried about the state of affairs in relation to the functions of the offices of the State Attorney. So today we are joined by the Solicitor General, who will talk to us about the important role that his office plays in state litigation, as well. We will also look at the relations with the different organs of state and what he intends to do to improve the level and quality of services offered by the offices of the State Attorney. SG, good afternoon, and thank you so much for making time for us.
Good afternoon, Aldrin, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Let's start off, SG, with explaining exactly what the State Attorney's office does.
Well, the State Attorney's office is a creature of statute. If you may, it's the law firm for the state. It's comprised of women and male that are, in fact, qualified in terms of the Legal Practice Act, and they are appointed. The difference is that they are not actually operating in the private space. They operate as public servants, but they need to be compliant with the Legal Practice Act prescripts. So they are admitted attorneys, if you may. And we do have a few that are also state advocates who fall within that realm of the state attorney framework.
Okay. And when we look at the capacity of the Office of the State Attorney currently, how would you characterize it? And also taking into consideration that in October, we also heard some concerns that have been raised by MPs around the vacancies in the Office of the State Attorney.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we were to unpack the word capacity, it actually has got two possible meanings. The one meaning might be derogatory in nature, in the sense that it seeks to say that people that are actually employed, they are not fit for purpose. The other much acceptable definition would be that it's capacity limitations, in the sense that we don't have enough warm bodies to fulfill the role of operating as state attorneys. I prefer the latter, because my view is that the men and women that are appointed as state attorneys are doing much critical work that no one else in the private sector would actually understand or know. I choose the latter for the following reasons. I've done an audit as part of my requirements in order to see whether I've got enough resources to be utilized as, in defense of the state. And there was a study that was done in 2016. It's called the Kaedu report, which I sought to be updated as at last year, it paints a very bleak picture. It says to me, if I were to have an outfit under the auspices of state attorney today, I need 2,852 attorneys, warm bodies. That is just under 2,900, if you may, or just under 3,000, if we were to round it off. If you look at what I have across the 13 offices of state attorney, I've got 305. Now, that is 10% of the required capacity that we will need in order to defend the interests of the state. So that is the capacity limitations that everybody laments about. It has not been going up, it is dwindling. It came from 400 odd, and it has been going down, and we are now sitting at 305 warm bodies against the requirements of 3,000, if you may, on the rounded up figure. So with that number, you have to juxtapose it with the number of active cases, the caseload. We've got 370,000 active cases that are being dealt with by 305 attorneys. That is an ominous situation, which in any environment is not acceptable. And I think I will pause there, my brother.
Sure, SG. Needing 3,000 and only having 305, and looking at the caseload of over 300,000 cases. What would you attribute this lack of capacity in terms of vacancies that we're speaking about now? Where does this derive from? And have you raised this issue with the ministers yet?
Yes, so there are strategic issues that one can in fact attribute to this state of affairs. My view, Aldrin, is that it won't help for me having an additional number of 2,700 attorneys in this space strategically. And I will tell you why. You know, it is not the duty of the state to be litigating against its citizens. Honestly, it's not. Now, if you are actually to have an army of people that are actually going to war, you must first identify the triggers to that war. My own personal view is there are other issues that must actually be ranked parallel to us managing this situation. I honestly, if you were to ask me the question, would you be able to survive with the number of attorneys that are there? If we were to, in fact, rewind the clock and say we don't have the backlog of 370,000 cases, with the policies that have been implemented or crafted under my stewardship, I can tell you now that we might be able to deal with this litigation. And briefly, just so that we deal with this issue, it is very tempting, perhaps, to blame government or blame the minister and say, no, we are undercapacitated. But we are not we don't create this litigation.
Yeah.
State litigation in itself must be managed through a multifaceted process. Now, there is this aspect of kicking the can down the road when it comes to state litigation, when it comes to government departments. Why are we having bloated court rolls under circumstances where these matters ought not to be there? You start with service delivery, Aldrin. All the matters that we deal with, the 370,000 odd matters, if you drill down on the issues, it's service delivery issues, whether somebody has been negligent or not in hospital, or alternatively it's police brutality, or it's anything else. You can always find a reason for it. Of course, in the number 370, some of them are fraudulent matters, right? So you need to first examine the causes and triggers of these 370,000 matters. Then we have actually strategically come up with the policies that I was actually alluding to, which were not there for the past 66 years when we were operating under the old State Attorneys Act. You would recall that when I was appointed in terms of the State Attorneys Amendment Act, which seeks to intervene in that space. And the interventions that we are actually dealing with now are, I have, since being appointed to that office, developed 7 critical instruments. The first instrument is the state litigation strategy, which seeks to guide litigation, how litigation must be managed going forward. And then we deal with a compendium of 6 chapters of a policy, which is stated in the act that appoints me. And these are, just not to waste your time, these are 6 critical pillars which, when properly implemented, we should not be talking about this thing in the years or in the year to come. And the first one, Aldrin, is initiating, defending, and opposing of matters. Who calls the shots? Is it government departments, or is it something that must be examined under the auspices of the Office of the Solicitor General? Do we litigate for the sake of litigating, or just because the state can frustrate somebody? So going forward, there is something that we need to, in fact, be aligned to.
Okay.
The second one, Aldrin, quickly, is management and coordination of state litigation. You also have mediation policy. How many matters can be resolved at infancy if we were to try and mediate them, as opposed to having to take them to court? You also have other policies as well, which might not be relevant.
Okay.
But for the purposes of us managing this thing, we've got 6 critical instruments that we are now at implementation stage.
But then you have a situation where you have the Chief Justice of the country who takes on a public platform and then says that unfortunately he's found himself in a situation where the state cannot defend its own report because of the lack of capacity that the State Attorney's Office has, and that is a concern for him. But also he goes as far as getting the services from private companies, private law firms, on a pro bono basis.
Well, look, Aldrin, tongue in cheek, I think I want to circumstantially avoid having to take the Chief Justice on. But I don't entirely agree with some of the sentiments that have been expressed online. But I don't think this is an opportunity for me because we have had a meeting and we dealt with some of these issues. It might seem as if I'm having a go at him.
Yeah.
Some of the
but is it true what he says?
Some of the matters might be weighty, Aldrin. So let me unpack it this way. When there is capacity limitation, the second phase of what I've spoken about, it is the Office of the Solicitor General that must make sure that there is capacitation in relation to any government department that is in fact dealing with a critical issue that requires legal expertise. You follow the normal processes. You don't just wake up and go and appoint somebody else at, I don't know, you can name any other place at a village and point and say, hey, come and help me, without following protocols. The protocols that are required in the state is, when you use public funds, you need to follow certain processes that are laid down in terms of treasury instructions. And this space is a problematic space because before I was appointed, people were doing as they pleased. They would wake up, go and appoint their uncles, their relatives, everybody else under the guise of helping them. And I'm actually just broadening it so that you understand what the problem is about state litigation and consumption of state legal services. It is impermissible for anybody to just wake up and actually go and appoint somebody else and expect that you will watch that under the state attorney's modicum. Now, we do have limitations, as I've already indicated. How do I complement the 2,700 capacity that I don't have? I need to go through a policy called briefing and outsourcing of state legal work. It's a very easy policy, Aldrin. If you were to read it, it actually tells you what the problem statement is and when can you then go outside and secure the additional capacity that you don't have. Now, there are people that would want to have it their way, by throwing their weight, and actually, as an affront to the policy that applies, want to do things their own way. I can't subscribe to that. Now, what the CJ was actually referring to was to request additional capacity in the sense of us getting private legal practitioners to come and assist under the auspices of state attorney. That has been done, Aldrin. There are individuals from time to time that assist the state from the private sector to complement the 2,700 capacity that I don't have. And that includes advocates and attorneys.
Okay. But in this particular case, he speaks about having to acquire services from law firms on a pro bono status because the state attorney's office doesn't have the capacity.
I would not know those arrangements, Aldrin. I think my answer to that question is where there is capacity limitation, it is incumbent on the Office of the Solicitor General to come up with solutions. I don't know the arrangements of pro bono and how and when were those negotiations entered into. I was not a party there too.
Does it concern you though?
That it does concern me to the extent that it seems there could be a deviation in relation to policy when it comes to state litigation. I've already explained to you there is a process which is very easy when it comes to getting extra capacity to assist offices of state attorney. But given the fact that I was not privy to the arrangement that you referred to, I'll find it very difficult to comment, even though the public statements have been made. I don't know the circumstances that led to the public statements. But if you were to ask me, as we sit right now, what then happened? What then happened was, having looked into this issue and having had various meetings, we have, in fact, under the auspices of the State Attorney Johannesburg, gotten private legal firms to come on board and assist, and they are being paid. It is not pro bono. We have made resources available to deal with that.
Was this after he made the statement?
Well, look, I mean, even when he made the statement, you would recall, Aldrin, that we had actually, as the state, filed the requisite notices to appoint. So I don't want there to be two centers of power, the other one, having to oppose each other publicly. But I think there is a way in which these things could have been dealt with much better than actually trying to put anybody under the bus.
That is the Solicitor General of the country, Fetsezani Panderani, speaking there about the state that the Office of the State Attorney is currently in, and also what the Chief Justice has said, that the State Attorney lacks capacity and therefore he has had to go to private law firms. So private law firms have come up to him and said that they're willing to do the work for him pro bono to defend the state capture report. We're taking your calls on 086 0002032 and your voice notes on 0614 104 107. You can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear.
Rand Water is concerned about the significant increase of water consumption in its areas of supply. The increase in water consumption is putting severe strain on Rand Water's distribution network. To save water, please do not wash your cars with hose pipes. Use buckets. Water your garden with sprinklers between sunset and sunrise. Do not wash your pavements with hose pipes. Use brooms. Repair your leaking taps. Cover your swimming pools to avoid quick evaporation. Shower instead of bathing in a tub.
This message is sponsored by Rand Water in partnership with City of Joburg, City of Ekurhuleni, and City of Tshwane.
Nottingham Forest welcome their visitors, Brighton and Hove Albion, with warm hands, but insist the valuable 3 points will remain at City Ground.
And you makes it first time, it's a brilliant goal! Elanga hits.
However, the Seagulls are not willing to part ways with maximum points, as they prefer a position in the top half.
The dinger is in, what a run, what a goal!
This is the Premier League. Catch the glittering clash between Nottingham Forest and Brighton and Hove Albion on Saturday, 25 November at 4 p.m. live on S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. #We love it here. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
SAFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng Mogoeng.
When something is in the heart, you really don't need to be checking as if it was something that was designed to facilitate your appointment. One of the things that I promised the nation was to make sure that transformation happens, with a view to ensuring that work is somewhat evenly distributed among whites, black people, and both black and white women. That is the one responsibility among many that I have pursued with everything within my heart.
The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za.
SAFM, leading the conversation.
This is Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
And in conversation with the Solicitor General of the country, as we look at the state of the office of the State Attorney. SG, as we conclude, looking at one other matter that came out a bit earlier on this year was the legal fees claims against the former President Jacob Zuma. What's the amount standing at currently?
Yeah, that's another weighty matter. So when the DA and the EFF made the application, which in fact started this whole aspect for the refundable amounts that were deemed by the court to have been paid inconsistent with state legal funding policy, it was at 18.2 million rand.
Is it 80 or 18?
No, 18. 18.18 or 18.2. But we, as the eyes and ears of the state, and after all those court orders have been done, we delved into the records with the assistance of the state accountants. And to answer your question, we're sitting roughly at about 29 without adding interest. 29 is a straight expense on state legal funding in relation to that matter without factoring in any interest that would have accrued onto the capital. So the answer is we're sitting at between 28 and 29. I might not have the exact figure as we speak.
Is there any anticipation that those fees could actually increase considering other litigations as well?
Look, if
ongoing
before this matter, we're no longer funding. So there would not be any possibility of those funds escalating beyond what I actually am indicating, because there is no request that has been made by the former president for state legal funding, and neither are we having any matter which falls within that category.
Okay. And you say the 29 million, any possibility of that amount increasing?
Well, look, if it were to be determined by the court that deals with, that will be hearing this matter, that interest over the period needs to be, to accrue to the capital. Yes, there is that possibility, but I don't want to second guess court processes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm thinking just with the straight figure.
Okay. And then on the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, how much in total was spent there?
The State Capture Commission of Inquiry would not necessarily fall under my auspices. I can only deal with the litigation costs or costs that were paid to the various individuals that were presenting the matter. But I think the public figures that have been punted and contained in the audited statements of the Department of Justice will fairly reflect the amount that has been spent. So my answer is the spent in relation to state capture falls under the baseline budget of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, and I would not actually venture into that area.
And with the current litigation on defending the state capture report, are you able to give us an amount there?
We as at the moment, we've got a budget of about 6 million rand that has been set aside. It's public funds. I can mention that amount. There is a possibility that it might not be sufficient to cover the 12 matters that are currently under review, but we are trying to apply austerity measures by negotiating with the service providers, to take special conditions for us having to deal with these matters, because we are the people that are actually being taken on review. So to expect the state to spend much needed resources that would be going to other projects for litigation which is unending, is also not in the interest of the state. So we are in constant communication with the individuals identified to assist. And of course, we will be reviewing this issue from time to time. But the budget allocated to me in order to deal or assist with the review applications and to defend the interests of the state as we speak right now stands at 6 million rand.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. That is Fetsizani Pandarani, who is the Solicitor General of the country. 0614-104107. You can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear. Apologies, we're a bit late for the news headlines.
In the headlines this hour, the Mangaung Metro Municipality in the Free State says water supply in the Bloemfontein CBD, Heuwelsig, Bayswater and nearby areas will be restored at midnight. The Reserve Bank governors announced that interest rates will remain steady. And Qatar's foreign ministry has announced that a truce between Israel and Hamas in Gaza will start tomorrow at 7 a.m. local time, with the first batch of hostages to be released in the afternoon at 4 p.m. I'll have a full update at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
And a final traffic update with Rob Byrne.
Yeah, thanks. There's been a very big crash in on the R59 just over the Gauteng border, so between the Vaal River and Sasolburg, nothing moving much in either direction on that section of the 59. Just keep in mind as well, if you're driving northern suburbs of Joburg today, there's a broken down truck on the M1 south of the Winnie Mandela Drive exit. So big queues from Buccleuch down to Four Ways, and then from Rivonia through Paulsofen into Four Ways, that whole area with load shedding, so lots of additional delays as well. Durban side, it's been a really busy day as the roadworks intensify around Spaghetti Junction. There's traffic restrictions now between Pavilion Mall and Spaghetti Junction, so that's on both sides of the N3, and that's quite heavy coming into Durban. Also the N2 south towards the M7, very slow. And Cape Town, a crash a little bit earlier on the Komiki Road. Just watch for some delays there near Masipumalala, and very heavy today on Kloof Neck Road. It's a lovely day, so a lot of people heading to Atlantic Seaboard. It's busy, leaving the CBD through Gardens and Thomas Kloof and through Kloof Neck as well. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Khapele.
And it's a final sports update with Tuming Khapele, who ends her bulletin with Mudimukio. What's the rationale behind it? What's the thing?
God be with you.
Yeah.
God be with you.
Yeah, how did you come up with it?
It's just my language. It's like God bless.
Yeah.
So I just say it Kasitswan.
Mudimukio.
Yeah.
Barinko hai.
Amen.
Amen.
All right, let's get straight into your sports, starting off with rugby. Springbok centre Lukhanyo Am says that it feels amazing to be back on the pitch after missing the 2023 Rugby World Cup due to injury. Despite not being named to the initial World Cup squad, Am was later called up to France as a replacement for wing Makazola Mapimpi ahead of the quarter-final match against France. Am regrettably did not even make the bench in those remaining 3 matches as South Africa defended the Webb Ellis Cup. He played his first competitive games since early August in the Sharks' 12-13 loss to Connacht in the Rugby Championship over the weekend.
It's been really good. I think from the last season and rejoining the group, there's a lot of excitement, within the group, and I think everyone has bought in the style of play that we want to play, and I think we're definitely in the right direction. So it's been really good and exciting.
In football, Banyana coach Desiree Ellis has included veteran Janine van Wyk in her 24-member squad to face Burkina Faso at the Women's Africa Football WAFCON qualifiers on the 30th of November. Now, this was after van Wyk did not get a chance to earn her 184th cap against DR Congo during the CAF Women's Olympic qualifiers. And should Coach Ellis play van Wyk in those 2 games, the JVWFC boss will become the most capped player, male or female, on the continent, and Ellis says that she still intends to give van Wyk or make sure that she breaks that record.
We will do our utmost best to get to those 2 caps. It's not just a record for her, but I think it's a record for women's football in the country. It's a record for SAFA and a record for women's football on the continent. And yes, she was in the previous camp, and I was asked the question by the media, is there another opportunity? And I said, Burkina Faso, and here is the opportunity.
Meanwhile, Captain Rifila Jane, who recently returned to training with her club in Italy, has not made the squad as she continues her recovery from the serious injury that she picked up at the FIFA Women's World Cup. In the meantime, Wembley's arch will only be lit for football and entertainment. This is under a new policy approved by the Football Association Board. Now, the decision follows criticism after the arch was not lit in the colors of the Israel flag following attacks on the country by Hamas in October. Israel retaliated with the airstrikes in Gaza and stopped food, water, fuel and medicine going into the territory. Now, a period of silence was held at Wembley for innocent victims of the conflict that preceded England's friendly against Australia on the 13th of October. Meanwhile, Everton fans are set to fly a protest banner over Etihad Stadium ahead of Liverpool's clash with Manchester City on Saturday, and it comes after Everton was hit with a 10-point deduction for a breach of the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. In a statement, Everton supporters groups say that they plan to stage a protest during Saturday's lunchtime kick-off at the Etihad is in place, and that they had a lot of requests asking for a plane to be flown over Goodison Park on Sunday with a message to the Premier League. In cricket, former West Indies player Aldrin Sampear has been banned from all cricket for 6 years for breaching anti-corruption rules. Sampear was found guilty on 4 offences, including failing to disclose gifts and payments and obstructing or delaying the investigation. The 42-year-old retired from all professional cricket. That was back in November 2020, and he won the T20 World Cup twice, top scoring for West Indies in both finals. Ending things off with motorsport, Christian Horner has claimed that Lewis Hamilton's representatives contacted Red Bull earlier this year after the 7-time world champion driving alongside Max Verstappen. Now, the 38-year-old signed a new 2-year contract at Mercedes in August to extend his stay in Formula One beyond his 40th birthday, and it came amid a season of struggle for Mercedes as Verstappen eased to a 3rd consecutive world title in a dominant Red Bull car. There was speculation over Hamilton's future for much of the season, and Red Bull team principal Horner has now claimed that they received an approach from his representatives before he committed to Mercedes. However, Hamilton has now come out saying that actually Horner is the one that reached out to him. So who's lying and who's telling the truth? We don't know. But that said, it's a wrap from my side. For SAFM Sport, I'm Dumi Kapela. Don't forget to tune in to Top Sport with Michael Abramson. That's from 7 till 9 p.m. From my side, Mudi Mukio.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Mzansi, we thank you for what you did yesterday, today, and what you will do tomorrow to meet your tax obligations. By submitting your income tax returns on time and keeping your personal and banking information up to date, you have made your tax matters daily matters. Our gratitude as SARS is immeasurable. We thank you for contributing to our country's prosperity. Visit sars.gov.za to keep your details updated. Your tax matters. SARS at your service.
Have you ever noticed how unique the rugby ball is?
You should check out Head High.
The rise of junior rugby stars Mana and Tai.
Vince is not just their stepfather, he's their coach.
Catch the brothers' dream of the black jersey, Head High, every Sunday at 9 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com.
# Rugby Drama Galore. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
And it's time for MoneyWeb Market Update with Jimmy Moyaha. Jimmy, good evening. Welcome to the show. What's coming up?
Good evening, Aldrin. Good evening to the listeners. We have a review of the central bank meeting today. We had that MPC rates decision. The central bank elected to keep our interest rates unchanged. We get a sense of what that means for the outlook going forward. There's expectations around possibly seeing rate cuts very early next year. The question was posed to the Reserve Bank governor. He did comment on that. So we just look at what that meeting looked like and what the sentiment is from the Reserve Bank side of it, and potentially what it looks like as it compares to the likes of the US and other economies. We get a sense of some commentary from the board chair at Nedbank, Daniel Mninele, about the appointment of Jason Quinn as the next Nedbank chief executive, pending, of course, those approvals. And then we take a look at the proposed tax changes that could be coming into effect in an effort to improve South Africa's position in terms of the grey listing that we went under. So we speak to the chair of the South African Institute for Professional Accountants and just get a sense of what these potential tax implications look like, or these proposed tax changes. I think there's a tax amendment bill that is going to sit before Parliament to be voted on, and what that means for you and I as taxpayers, of course. And then we take a look at the SME space, because it is Thursday, and if you're wondering what to get someone for Christmas, we're going to start looking into those kinds of SMEs, right? Local SMEs that would be really good Christmas ideas. And today's one is a company that customizes pens. You know, those fountain pens. And I don't know how much a Mont Blanc is at the moment, but I know that those things are ridiculously expensive and they're not very personal. So we speak to a company based in George that customizes these pens and allows you and I to add a special, unique flavor to whatever we want the pen to look like, or multiple pens, and then you can actually send that to your loved ones. So that's going to be our SME of the week feature today. But before we get to all of that, we've had Henko Creer keeping an eye on the markets today. Very little reaction following that MPC announcement. I thought we might see some movements on the Rand. The Rand hasn't done much, but for more updates, Henko's going to give us some of those updates. Good afternoon, Henko. Thanks so much for keeping an eye on the markets. Rand unchanged, pretty much sitting at 18 Rand 80 where it was yesterday.
Yes, Jimmy, good evening to you, and hello, Aldrin, and good evening to all the listeners. Yes, Jimmy, I'm also quite surprised to see the little to no reaction after the announcement this afternoon, with the JSE finishing 0.9%. That's almost 1% stronger today, and that was a level of 75,439 points. The financial index gained 1%. The industrial index looks quite nice, 1.6% stronger, but the resources index finishing quite flat and losing about 0.1%. Process gained 2% today. Standard Bank, Naspers and First Rand each finished 1.8% stronger, and British American Tobacco and Anglo each gained 0.8%. It was also a great day for Implats and Mr. Price. Those two gave strong performances today, each finishing 8.5% stronger. Then Telkom came back fighting, 7.5% up today. Northern and Amplats each gained 6%, and MTN, ARM, Truworths, Pick n Pay as well as Pepkor Holdings each gained 4% today. But on the negative side, Anglo Gold lost 5% today, and then Montauk and Spar each 4.5% weaker. Goldfields, Italtal, Alphaman and Sirius each lost 3%. On the commodities market, the price of gold below $2,000 and now trading at $1,993 an ounce. Silver is sitting at $23.60. Platinum trading at $917 an ounce, and palladium at $1,055. Brent crude now trading above $80, sitting at $80.50 a barrel. And like you mentioned, the Rand really not moving a lot after this afternoon's announcement. Looks very similar to yesterday this time. 18 Rand 80 to the dollar, 23 Rand 57 to the pound, 20 Rand and 50 cents to the euro, and 12 Rand and 30 cents to the Australian dollar. A Bitcoin will cost you $37,300, and that's more or less 705,000 Rand. And Jimmy, in short, that's how the markets performed. Not much going on in the US because they are celebrating Thanksgiving today, so their markets are closed.
US markets are closed. Also, Asian markets were closed in Japanese markets. So the Nikkei was closed today for Workers' Day. So very little movements happening there. Despite this, the markets were still up. Thanks for that update, Henku. We will dig into some of these movements later on. The oil price is back above $80. I don't know how I feel about that, but I suppose it is better than closer to $100 for the moment. So we'll dig into that and some other stories a bit later on. The likes of Spar putting out a trading statement today, as well as Mr. Price and City Lodge putting out a voluntary update. So I want to look at some of those stories, but we'll look into those just after 6 p.m. For now, Aldrin, we're going to cross back to you and the team.
Thank you so much. That's Jimmy Moyaha back again just after 6 o'clock. We're taking your calls on 086 000 2032. You can also drop me a voice note on 0614 104 107 and an X at Aldrin Sampear.
The only talk radio afternoon drive show that makes sense. Beyond the Headline with Aldrin Sampear, right here on SAFM.
Good evening, Aldrin Sampear. How are you doing this afternoon, buddy? State capture. What a nice name, man. I was so vindicated when Mr. Matsela Koko, not that he won the case, but the case was striking out of the roll. It doesn't necessarily mean that he won the case, but I'm so happy for him. I'm so happy for him because all what he was saying on the state capture. Nobody took care of what he was saying. Even the chairperson of the state capture report, Mr. Zondo himself, he never took any notice of what he was saying about the optimum coal mine, about the Glencoe, and so forth. Look at now, we are having a load shedding, non-stop. Thank you.
An ex here from Sir Paps who says that as a former state manager, the state attorney or solicitor general is answering the questions that you are asking with the caution, knowing very well that fighting with the office of the Chief Justice on air would be very detrimental. Same with us financial managers having to answer the Auditor General when he or she makes his or her statements in public without giving the other side the right of reply, and the rules and the regulations governing all these matters, as he says, is the PFMA.
Get ready for an adventure of a lifetime with SABC TV Licenses Ultimate Competition. Feel the pulse-pounding excitement of a Bundesliga match live on an all-expenses-paid journey you'll never forget. Or embrace the rhythm of your dreams at the Coachella Music Festival. The choice is yours. A football fan's paradise or a music lover's haven. Simply pay your TV license, then head to www.winnerholidayWithSABCTVLicenses.co.za for a chance to win big. And don't forget, there are incredible weekly prizes up for grabs too. TV licenses. Pay yours. Make a difference.
Mzansi, we thank you for what you did yesterday, today, and what you will do tomorrow to meet your tax obligations. By submitting your income tax returns on time and keeping your personal and banking information up to date, you have made your tax matters daily matters. Our gratitude as SARS is immeasurable. We thank you for contributing to our country's prosperity. Visit sars.gov.za to keep your details updated. Your tax matters. SARS at your service.
It all comes together with a great partnership.
Thank you for demonstrating that indeed you are proudly South African.
Africa Borwa witnessed a great Rugby World Cup France 2023 because of your incredible support.
Great friends, great prize, and great sport.
Asibonge Kasulaga. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
#SAFMBTH.
Well, as promised, here's the response from the Reserve Bank Governor, Lisicha Kganyago, on the question around the story of how the rand has been manipulated, and also some of the interventions that he says the Reserve Bank has come up with after hearing about the possible rand manipulation. And of course, he was mentioning this during the repo rate announcement, which remains unchanged at 8.25%.
Competition Commission, rent manipulation. If the Competition Commission is busy with an inquiry on rent manipulation, the question should correctly be directed at the Competition Commission and not the Reserve Bank. But for the benefit, for your benefit, let me say the following. In 2001, South Africans believed that some chaps are sitting somewhere conspiring against us to weaken the rand. These chaps were conspiring somewhere to weaken the rand. And in 2002, we launched a commission of inquiry into the rapid depreciation of the rand. You can Google it, you'll find it on the website of the Department of Justice. It's a thick report, otherwise known as the Mybeck report. Before the commission could come to an end, a bank approached the Reserve Bank with an offer of a settlement. And the settlement was that the transactions they entered into will be unwound and the profits they had made would be forfeited. The difference between that inquiry and the inquiry of the Competition Commission is that that inquiry dealt with breaches of exchange control regulations. That is why the Reserve Bank was involved, because it was breaches of exchange control regulations. For completeness, in 2009-10, the rand was appreciating. South Africans believed that somebody is conspiring against us to make the rand so strong and make the life of South African exporters a living hell. No commission of inquiry was called then. In 2015, we picked up globally that there were reports of market abuse by institutions in various markets. For your benefit, if you remember, in the UK there was the LIBOR manipulation issue. And there were concerns also in the foreign exchange markets. We decided that we are going to start making inquiries. And we asked the former senior deputy governor of the Reserve Bank, Mr. James Cross, to lead a process to establish whether there were any abuses. That report is available on the South African Reserve Bank website. Amongst its key recommendations was that we must develop a code for the foreign exchange market in South Africa. As we were trying to develop that code, we established that the BIS was working on a global code. South Africa joined that process of developing the global code. And we didn't just say that we have adopted the code, we actually pledged our commitment to the code. That pledge is on the website of the South African Reserve Bank. We are not the only ones. Many other central banks around the world have done a pledge of a similar nature. Whilst we were busy with that inquiry, the Competitions Commission approached us and said to us that they have picked up news from some foreign authorities that amongst the global alleged manipulation of exchange rates is also a rand-dollar pair. And based on that, they are embarking on a process of inquiry. They approached us and asked us for assistance because we are in the foreign exchange market. We spent hours and hours with them. We provided them with all the assistance they require. Should they require any further assistance from us, they will get it. But they are the competent authority to investigate any allegations of market abuse or market manipulation. They must be given the space to do their work and follow their processes, and we should not be burdening them with asking for running commentary. They are the competent authority on these matters. That's all I could assist you with Beyond that, you are not going to get any other comment from the South African Reserve Bank.
Well, that is the Reserve Bank Governor's response to the question around the rand manipulation. A bit odd for me, I have to say, because once again, when I spoke to the head of the Competition Commission's unit on cartels, he actually said, because this thing has been happening since 2007 up until 2013, the Reserve Bank as the prudential authority should have actually picked this up. The prudential authority should have picked it up. But it didn't pick it up, and we don't get an explanation here that why it is that the Prudential Authority, the Reserve Bank, wasn't able to pick up that there is this rand manipulation that is happening. But anyway, it is an ongoing story. We now wait for the judgment from the Competition Appeals Court on the appeal that has been brought by the banks that have argued that the competition commissions that have contested the competition commission's jurisdiction around the investigation into the rand manipulation. We know that the three banks have come forward and have settled around 110 million rand in settlement fines that have been paid so far. Standard Chartered Bank as well as Citigroup, two of the banks that have actually settled, and ABSA, of course, which was Barclays at the time, said that they are cooperating with the Competition Commission in its investigation, and they have also given the Competition Commission evidence with regards to the manipulation of the rand. We've come to the end of our voyage. Thank you so much for choosing Flight SAFM BTH 326 with me, Aldrin Sampear. Today we are playing out with Atomic Kitten. Whole again, and our parting shot is from Melinda Gates, who once said, if you are successful, it is because somewhere, sometime, someone gave you a life or an idea that started you in the right direction. Remember also that you are indebted to life until you help some less fortunate person, just as you were helped. And Zakes is reading our credits this evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have come to the end of our voyage. We are touching down on SAFM Airport on flight BTH. We're gonna thank the crew, Dumi on Sports, Temba, Kanya, Vusani, KG, Katsu and Lundi, and thanks to the captain and the good flight. Give it to Aldrin Sampear. I think we're gonna have a good one. Have a good festive holiday, guys, and take care of yourselves. It's Zix from Steben. Shout outs. Thank you.
Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
Remember to love each other and lead with compassion. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
If you see me walking down the street, staring at the sky, dragging my 2 feet, you just pass me by. It still makes me cry, but you can't make